Discipline does not mean punishment, but formation, like the training of a child by a loving parent or an athlete by a dedicated coach. It's about building endurance, strength, and character, not through comfort, but through trial.
मूलं समीक्ष यत्र गम्यताम् सर्वेषां मार्गं तथैव प्रवृत्ति.
Sisters and brothers, a very hearty welcome to each one of you to the 21st Sunday in the ordinary time of the liturgical year. The Gospel we hear today from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 13, verses 22 to 30, does not offer cheap grace. Jesus, when asked, "Lord, will those who are saved be few?" does not give a number or an easy formula. Instead, he says, "Strive to enter through the narrow door." This is not a door of comfort, not a door of privilege, and certainly not a door of inherited status. It is a door of struggle, of discipline, and of moral courage. At the same time, through the first reading, Isaiah the prophet proclaims a God who gathers people of every nation and language, a radical inclusivity. And the second reading from the letter to the Hebrews reminds us that hardship and discipline are not signs of God's rejection, but of God's deep and transforming love. In this narrow yet open door, we meet the life story of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, a man born at the bottom of India's caste ladder, who through his suffering, intellect, and courage rose to become the voice of justice and the father of modern India's constitution. His journey embodies the very struggle Jesus speaks of, a path of fire, but one that leads to true liberation. Yes, strive to enter through the narrow door. Jesus' command to strive comes from the Greek word agony, the root word for agony. It means that this is not about casual effort. It's the struggle of athletes, warriors, and revolutionaries. The narrow door is not a literal entrance. It is a powerful metaphor for true discipleship, not mere religious observance or identity, but a life of transformation. It's in fact a costly grace. As Dietrich Bonhoeffer puts it, grace is free, but not cheap. It requires something of us, our ego, our pride, our complicity with injustice. It demands equally urgency and decision. The Greek word translated for strive implies a kind of spiritual struggle or wrestling. The door is narrow, not because God is cruel, but because the way of truth and love requires deliberate choice and perseverance. In other words, the narrow door is open to all, but not entered by all, because it cannot be walked through with privilege on our shoulders. It cannot be carried through by mere religious familiarity. We ate and drank in your company, as the gospel would say. It can only be entered by those who have been humbled, purified, and converted in heart. In India, Many are born into systems that deny them access not just to resources, but to dignity. Especially those from Dalit, Adivasi, backward and marginalized communities. The door is not naturally open to them. In fact, society often slams it shut. B.R. Ambedkar, the architect of the Indian Constitution, was born in 1891 into the Mahar caste, then classified as untouchable. His early life was marked by humiliation. At school, he was not allowed to sit with others. He could not drink from the same water tap. He was often ignored by teachers or left outside the classroom. Yet, from these ashes, Ambedkar rose. He struggled not just personally, but as a leader of a social resurrection. He pursued education not as a status symbol, but as a weapon of liberation. He earned multiple doctorates from Columbia University and the London School of Economics, a global intellectual powerhouse from the gutters of caste India. He returned not to enjoy prestige, but to fight for justice. That is the narrow door. In the first reading from the book of Isaiah, we get the picture of a gospel for the marginalized. Isaiah's prophecy reminds us that God is not the God of one people only. God's mission is to gather those who were once far off and make them priests, leaders, and witnesses. When we look at the story of our nation, we notice that Dr. Ambedkar believed the same. He saw how dominant forms of religion in India had excluded the oppressed, using divine sanction to maintain caste divisions. In response, he burned the Manusmriti in 1927, rejecting religious texts that institutionalized untouchability. He led temple entry movements such as the Mahat Satyagraha to demand equal access to public spaces. He said, "I measure the progress of a society by the degree of progress women and the oppressed have achieved." Ambedkar wasn't just fighting for policy. He was fighting for a new theology where no human being is outside God's mercy. This is Isaiah's vision. The far off becoming priests, the excluded becoming ministers, the despised becoming honored. The second reading from the letter to the Hebrews tells us that God disciplines those he loves. Discipline, though painful, is part of our formation. The letter to the Hebrews is written to early Jewish Christians facing persecution, exclusion, and spiritual exhaustion. They were tempted to give up on faith, on community, on justice because of the cost they were paying. The writer responds with powerful reassurance. "My child, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, for the Lord disciplines the one he loves." Here, discipline, which comes from the Greek root paideia, does not mean punishment, but formation, like the training of a child by a loving parent or an athlete by a dedicated coach. It's about building endurance, strength, and character, not through comfort, but through trial. Yes, endure hardship as discipline. The author reframes suffering not as abandonment by God, but as a sign of belonging to God. In our Indian context, this radically reorients how we view the centuries-long oppression of Dalits, Adivasis, the poor, and the women. Their suffering is not a sign of inferiority nor of divine curse, as caste-based religion has falsely taught, but through the lens of the gospel, it becomes a space where God is at work, refining and dignifying His beloved. For people like Ambedkar, this was not mere philosophy, it was lived truth. Despite humiliation, he did not break. Despite opposition, he did not surrender. Despite loneliness, he did not lose sight of justice. That endurance was not in vain. It produced fruit for generations to come. As the letter to the Hebrews reminds us, strengthen your weak hands. Make straight paths for your feet. These words are both pastoral and prophetic. The author is saying, don't give up. Help each other. Stay on the narrow road. You are not alone. In our context today, this is a call to the church in India to strengthen those who are weary from daily injustice, to stand with them in solidarity. It's a call to Dalit and oppressed communities to not internalize shame, but to see their struggle as sacred, their identity as beloved, their history as holy ground. And it's a call to privileged Christians like us to enter the discipline of unlearning caste, confronting silence, and walking the path of costly discipleship. Jesus concludes with a powerful reversal. Indeed, some who are last will be first, and some who are first will be last. This is the spiritual climax of the gospel. God is not interested in appearances. He is interested in justice. In Ambedkar's life, we see this reversal already taking place. A man once denied entry into schools became the architect of the Indian Constitution. A people once considered untouchable now march under his name to demand equality, representation, and dignity. A faith once used to enslave now trembles under the challenge of a liberating gospel. Jesus is not promising a seat at the table to those who merely say, Lord, Lord. He is calling those who act with justice, who struggle for truth, and who endure discipline to enter the kingdom, even if they come from the lowest rungs of the world. My sisters and brothers, we cannot afford to be passive. Jesus says, strive to enter. That means we must stand with the oppressed, examine our own roles in systems of privilege, live a faith that does not hide behind rituals but shows up in solidarity, courage, and sacrifice. There are many people in our time, like Ambedkar, who are not saints in the traditional sense, but are prophets who in their suffering and truth-telling followed the narrow road of Christ more closely than many who sat in pews. Let's walk that road with Christ with courage. The door is narrow, but the kingdom is wide. And all who fight for truth and dignity will find themselves at the table with Jesus. Amen.
समीक्ष्य यत्र गम्यताम् सर्वेषां मार्गं तथैव प्रवृत्ति